Thank you for joining us on this very first episode of Tax Matters in the year 2023. We wish you a very happy and prosperous new year. We begin with sharing news of the passage of the Federal Government 2023 Appropriation Bill. It goes without saying that in the last 4 to 5 years, the National Assembly has religiously stuck to the passage of the Appropriation Bill before the end of the preceding year. That in itself is made possible by the early submission of the budget estimates by the Executive to the National Assembly. In the case of the 2023 Appropriation Bill, it was submitted to the National Assembly early in October 2022. All these combine to ensure a January to December budget cycle, and we must commend both the executive arm led by President Muhammadu Buhari and the two chambers of the National Assembly. A close look at the past appropriation bill, which will become an act upon assent by the President, shows that total budget is in the sum of 21,827,188,747,391 naira. The budget parameters include oil benchmark at $75 per barrel, exchange rate at 435 naira 57 kobo to $1 US. Daily oil production benchmark is put at 1.69 million barrels per day. Other parameters include GDP at 3.75% and inflation rate at 17.16%. The National Assembly has also passed a supplementary budget in the sum of 819.5 billion naira for year 2022. From one cheering news to another, and yet again, an event that epitomizes the seriousness of both the executive arm of government and the legislature. The Finance Bill 2022, which will support the Appropriation Act 2023, has also been passed by the National Assembly. Finance bills returned to the Nigerian governance space in the year 2019 with the passage of the Finance Act 2019. We have since had Finance Act 2019, Finance Act 2020 and Finance Act 2021. The Finance Act 2022 is the fourth in the series, and we dare say that this singular art or action, if you like, has really helped in advancing the frontiers of tax administration in Nigeria. While we assure you that we will serve you the full details of the Finance Act 2022 on the program, especially after the assent by Mr. President, permit us to share with you a few high points. The rate of tertiary education tax has been raised from 2.5% to 3%. The proposed taxation of gaming and lottery businesses under the Companies Income Tax Act has been jettisoned. Capital losses deductible for capital gains tax purposes may be carried forward for a maximum period of 5 years. The proposed 50% investment tax credit for investment in gas utilization has been changed to investment allowance of 10% and 5% per annum for non-associated and associated gas respectively, subject to attaining a cumulative production of 300 billion cubic feet. Exemption of companies engaged in upstream and midstream gas operations, along with agro-allied businesses and manufacturing companies, from the annual restriction of capital allowance utilization to 2/3 of accessible profits.
It is an offense punishable by a fine of 10 million naira and or imprisonment for any agency of the federal government other than FIRS to demand for books or returns for the purposes of tax. It is also an offense to carry out the function of assessment, collection or enforcement of tax, or pay any portion of tax revenue to any person or into any account other than the relevant accounts designated by the Constitution or relevant laws of the National Assembly. It pays to pay your tax. This message is brought to you by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS.
Welcome once again. You'll recall that on the 1st of November 2022, the FIRS announced the appointment of MTN Communications PLC, Airtel Networks Limited, and Money Deposit Banks as VAT source deduction agents in line with Section 14, subsection 3 of the VAT Act as amended, which gives powers to the FIRS to appoint any person to withhold or collect VAT and remit same to the service in the currency of transaction. The appointment, as well as the mandate to deduct VAT on all related transactions at source, took effect from the 1st of January 2023. The FIRS has since held an interactive session with MTN, Airtel, banks and relevant consultants. The sensitization workshop was held in Lagos on Tuesday, December 13, 2022. Sometime before the end of the year 2022, Tax Matters sat down with the Acting Director of VAT at the FIRS, Dr. Lovett Ononoga. It was a full-length interview that will come to you very soon on Tax Matters, but on today's episode, as a preamble to the story of the sensitization workshop, we will share with you the part that relates to the appointment of VAT source deduction agents. Joining us on today's episode of Tax Matters is Dr. Lovett Ononoga. She's the Director of Value Added Tax at the FIRS. Dr. Ononoga, welcome to Tax Matters.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome, ma.
Thank you.
Recently, the FIRS released a public notice whereby they appointed MTN and Airtel as VAT agents. Now, we would like to know what has really changed.
Okay. In very simple terms, Airtel, MTN, and all deposit banks in Nigeria now will, in addition to their own VAT, filing returns on their own VAT when they sell to recharge cars and, in the case of telecoms and, services in the case of banks. In addition to that VAT they were filing before, now they have the duty, having been made appointed as agents by FIRS, to withhold the VAT that they are invoiced by their own suppliers. Okay, so they now have to pay two types of VAT: their own VAT from their own business activity, and the VAT that they should have paid to their suppliers who supply them goods input in order to produce what they're selling. Okay, so that's the withheld VAT. So before, whereas they paid to the supplier goes and renders their return. Now they withhold it and then render a return. So two separate returns. We are going to separate it. We have asked them that they must separate it so that we can properly account for it. Now, this is something that we're hoping will tremendously increase compliance, especially compliance from smaller businesses. It will give us visibility of their business activity, who they are doing business with. So an MTN now has thousands of vendors, thousands of suppliers and contractors working for them. Whereas in the past we would have to chase after all those contractors. Now MTN would collect all that VAT and give it to us on behalf of the contractors. It's still the same 7.5%. When they collect this VAT, there is an input-output they net off before remitting their own VAT. But now they have both the input and also the output, right? So it comes to them, okay? So they will net it off against their own VAT, but remit all of the input on behalf of the beneficiaries.
Do you provide goods and services? Then you must answer these important questions. Are you registered for VAT? Do you charge VAT on the goods and services you provide? Do you keep records of all your transactions? Do you file VAT returns? Do you remit VAT collected to government coffers? If your answer to any of these questions is no, then you are breaking the law. The law demands total compliance. Therefore, you must register for VAT. You must charge VAT on goods and services. You must file VAT returns. And you must remit all VAT collected on behalf of government within 21 days to the bank nearest to you. To do otherwise is a crime punishable everywhere in the world. VAT is prescribed by the law. Do the right thing. Collect and pay VAT. This message is from the FIRS. It pays to pay your tax.
There you are. MTN, Airtel and all money deposit banks are now VAT source deduction agents. If you do business with any of them, yes, you will issue what is called a VAT invoice, but they will not pay you the VAT component. Rather, they will withhold at source and remit to the FIRS, providing your vital details, especially TIN. It is called withheld VAT. Now to the sensitization workshop.
Not too long ago, the management of FIRS appointed certain persons to be acting as VAT collection agents. And the caliber of people that we have in the room are those that belong to those categories. Either you are an agent or you are a vendor who renders services or does supplies to any of the appointed agents.
What are the legal underpinnings of this new procedure and how does it work?
The sections, applicable sections, is section 14.3 of the Value Tax Act. And that's the section that gives the service the power to appoint any person to withhold or collect VAT. Pursuant to that section, the companies so appointed are to withhold the VAT charge to them. When the customers give invoices to those agents that have been appointed, it's expected that the customers are to include VAT on the invoice, provided they are not exempt from charging VAT. Because we have a section of the taxpayers that are exempt from charging VAT when they make sales to their customers. So the VAT so charge, instead of the appointed agents to pay their suppliers together with VAT, the VAT element will be withheld. And where the supplier is exempt, that is the suppliers of those agents who are appointed, where supplier is exempt from tax, it's expected by law that the agents will self-charge itself of the VAT element. You know, I made mention that if you're exempt from charging VAT, obviously when you issue invoice, you will not include it. But that doesn't remove the duty of paying the VAT element of the supplies or of the supplies to tax authority. So instead of paying the tax to the supplier, the company or the agents who are appointed will self-charge itself and remit same to the service. We could have instance where an appointed agent is supplying to another appointed agent. So what happened? So we are proposing that the supplier, the person that is receiving the supply, and at the end of the day we pay for the supplies, should be the one to withhold the VAT. So if perhaps you have Airtel making some supplies to MTN. So when MTN is paying, because MTN is the one benefiting or enjoying the supply from Airtel, so he is the one that is mandated by this guidance to hold on to the VAT element.
Mrs. Ononoga made a presentation on returns filing procedure.
You need to separate the two VAT, right? The VAT to be withheld on the goods and services that you consume from the VAT that you generate from your own business activity. You have an obligation to self-charge if you buy from a supplier that is exempt from VAT. That the supplier is exempt from VAT does not make you exempt from VAT. So you self-charge. That's where the self-charge responsibility comes in. So all your vendors and suppliers that you consume their services or goods must be registered for VAT. Okay? So if this is why I said it's very important to carry your vendors and your suppliers along. So whether they are exempt from VAT or not, they need to be registered. Okay, so that's a prerequisite for your vendors on whose VAT you'll be withholding.
Mrs. Ononoga spoke on penalties for default.
There are penalties which you must be made aware of, so that you understand that, you know, you have very, very grave responsibility in this whole process. So Section 34 still stands. If you fail to withhold or to collect taxes that are due as an agent, you are liable for that tax that you have not collected. Therefore, the penalty is 150% of what you are supposed to have collected and you didn't collect. Okay. Then if you do not remit what you collect, there is also a penalty there, 10% of the unremitted amount, interest on what you did not remit, you know. And if you do not file in any 1 month your returns, then you are liable to 50,000 naira for the first month, and subsequent month is 25,000 naira. Now, let me explain that this keeps compounding for you on tax pro, you know, because everything is now on tax pro. Therefore, these penalties will just be automatically calculated.
How does the withheld VAT system work?
I'm very sure most of us have filed on Tax Pro, and we're focusing on VAT today. The process of filing VAT on the system has changed 360. And that's the essence why we have to come out here to actually show you how you can successfully file your returns with effect from 1st January 2023. For the withheld VAT, we've been running the withheld VAT with companies operating the oil and gas upstream and MDS. What does that mean? It means that if you are appointed as a super agent or agent of withholding VAT or VAT withholding agent, it means apart from your VAT responsibility in rendering your VAT Form 002, we've given you additional responsibility to actually deduct VAT from the invoice of all your suppliers and remit to us on their behalf. The MDS and companies operating the oil and gas upstream have been doing this for a while. But for the banks and the telcos, this is the very first time. So, how is it done? For the withholding VAT, any supplier that transacts with you at the point of payment, you have now been authorized. Instead of paying them VAT inclusive, you are to pay them net of VAT. The responsibility of the remittance of the VAT charge to you, instead of asking us to follow up with the vendor or the supplier, will rather come to you to give us account of the VAT you have withheld and remitted. At any point in time, when the VAT is deducted, a schedule must be prepared with the details of all of your vendors, including their TIN. Very important. You can make mistake in your vendor's name, no qualms, but please, as much as practicable, don't make mistake with their TIN, because that's the validating data upon which a beneficiary is identified. Then, secondly, we've seen instances whereby on the current existing system, unmodified, the authorized agents, instead of actually uploading the comprehensive detail of all the beneficiaries, one by one in the schedule, they would rather populate it with just a single line entry and pay it as a bulk amount. If you do so by January, you might actually be running contrary to the current business model. You are expected to upload or prepare or include every beneficiary with the details of the quantum of transaction that he transacted with you, with their respective value-added amount that you deducted, so that once you process that schedule, whosoever's name appears in that schedule will get his credit according to the invoice amount. So it means that if your name is not in the schedule, at the end of the day, you might not be able to get your credit. So to avoid that, we encourage you to actually take out time to prepare this, painstakingly prepare the schedules and ensure that no vendor is left out and no information is misimputed. Then secondly, which affects everyone, is the process of claiming input on the system now has also changed. The system as it is, when you file and you have qualifying input based on Section 17 of the VAT Act as amended, you enter your inputs or qualifying input for the period by yourself, because the field for claiming of input is actually open.
Mr. Mbami's presentation was followed by a practical demonstration of filing on tax pro marks. Thereafter followed a question and answer session. January 1st, 2023, the magic date. Tax administration in Nigeria is already at the next level. And we have learned a new phrase which we want you to keep to heart. WVAT, withheld VAT. That is a new one for MTN, for Airtel, for money deposit banks, and of course, the old ones on the block, MDAs and oil and gas companies. So there is VAT, there is withholding tax, and there is withheld VAT. We are coasting home and we want to conclude on a celebratory note. All we have been talking about today is automation, and automation. Tax pro marks, and you agree that at the FIRS, tax administration has indeed moved to the next level, and the world is watching. Only in October 2022, the Executive Chairman FIRS received the Excellence in Public Service Award in the Fiscal Reforms category. On Sunday, the 11th of December 2022, the FIRS received 2 awards at the 2022 Nigeria Technology Awards held in Lagos. The first award was Most Effective Use of Technology in Public Service, while the second award was Innovation in Public Engagement, Federal Agency, Public Service. The FIRS was represented at the event by a high-powered delegation led by the group lead, Digital and Innovation Support Group at the FIRS, Mrs. Chaka Ben Obi. And just as the year 2022 was packing its bags, news came in of the international recognition of 2 members of the FIRS management team. Mr. Matthew Bojumbola, the group lead of the Special Tax Operations Group at the FIRS, got global recognition as one of the world's top 50 tax persons for the year 2022. Mrs. Chaka Ben Obi, group lead of the Digital and Innovation Support Group of the service, emerged as the winner of the 2023 Isaka Technology for Humanity Award in recognition of her efforts in championing the transformation of Nigeria's FIRS to a digitalized organization. Isaka, the awarding institution, is an international professional association focused on IT governance. What do these awards mean to the FIRS?
We are very excited that all the efforts that we're making in deploying technology to make life easier for our taxpayers to comply and pay their taxes is being recognized and honored today.
We joined the Executive Chairman FIRS, the board and other members of the management team in congratulating the duo of Mr. Matthew Bojumbola and Mrs. Chaka Benobi for these well-deserved awards. We expect more in 2023. Once again, we wish all our viewers a successful year 2023 as we expect that you join us every week for information and education on taxation. Thank you for watching.